Bienvenue. Welcome one and all to another live stream with David Treacle, Chernick, and Gareth Wax of the Many Purple Hats.
Yo.
Immediately, we've been joined by a whole bunch of people, which is lovely. Thank you very much for joining us today. We talk about modern sales, or what David likes to call the modern sales meltdown. But today we're talking about forecasting because, let's face it, pollsters have been most ineffectual at predicting certain elections recently. And it goes to show that forecasting can be as faulty as anything if you don't do it correctly. Am I right, David?
100%, man. I mean, the last polls I saw for the US election were, I think, generally saying it's too close to call or anything can happen. And then before that, all sorts of polls said, various sorts of things. I think one of the more recent set of polls, like poll of polls, had Harris, like in various states, sort of a few ahead, but in those states that called, she was quite a lot behind. So, I'm not a pollster, and I don't really know what happens in that world, but it all the way through. It made me think of the one sort of polling I do, or forecasting I do, which is sales forecasting,
right?
Which again is almost always wrong, and so wrong that people just ignore it anyway. We'll go to the sales guys, or we'll try and do it ourselves if we're a micro business, and then we'll ignore our forecast and lick our finger and put it in the air and take a reading of the wind and look at what we got last year, add a few percent if we're feeling a bit hot, and that will be our forecast.
So are you saying that most forecasts are rubbish?
Most forecasts are rubbish, but at least with sales forecasting, because sales happens all the time, there's a lot more data to go on.
Right.
Yes. And so, I as you know, I always advocate for data. And although it is true that past performance is no guarantee of future performance, there are some readings that we can take if you're interested in forecasting. A lot of people.
Up to a point. Here's the thing: most sales are controlled either by a sales director or a sales manager, or at least presided over by one. And one of the things they want to do is be able to stand up in front of a steering committee or a board or a director's meeting and say, I can see it going busting through the roof. This is when it's going to happen, and these are the people who are going to do it for us. And,
right.
and this is where it all falls down because the information they've got is for a bunch of people who are like desperate puppies wanting to please them, wanting to give them just the information they want to see without necessarily being based on accurate reality.
That's right. That is right. And if you ask anybody in a board, if you're in a business where there is a board of directors, and they are receiving forecast information from their salespeople, they'll generally say that they pretty much ignore it, whatever they're told, and they'll take a reading based on historical performance year on year. And actually, the reality in my experience is that very few sales directors present to the board a forecast that they have been communicated to by their sales teams. Yeah, they will also take a view on it. In fact, if you have a sort of a tiered management system where you have sales managers, they'll be asking their salespeople for their forecast. They'll be asking for the size of the pipeline. They'll be looking. They'll be asking also for a forecast. They'll be taking a view on each salesperson's forecast and think, well, right. Dave, I know he says he's going to do such, but he's never going to do that, right? He's going to be 90% of what he did last year. And then the sales manager will report to the sales director. And the sales director will go to this from the sales manager and say, well, I'm sorry, but Gareth, no, he's not going to do that. He's not going to do it. He's going to do it. I'm certainly not going to go in front of the board.
Gareth always does well. Gareth's on the nose, man.
And then the sales director goes to the board and tends to give a much more measured view of things. You know, if it's a good sales director, they'll have access to lots of data, experience, and, you know, perhaps a better idea of market forces and the way the rest of the business is going, and, you know, its ability to execute on orders and all of that kind of thing. And they'll come up with a figure. Now, we know that that forecasting is reasonably accurate at board level, because if you look certainly at listed companies, where companies miss their forecasts that they have communicated to the markets and their shareholders, you know, it's fairly rare, relatively speaking, that they have to do a forecast adjustment and make that announcement. So if you're a listed company, you have to be even more sensitive to these factors. And so, you know, there is an element of caution there. But meanwhile, the targets that you are assigning to your salespeople are generally going to be slightly higher than what they will forecast. So you can see immediately that there's a lot of psychology that goes into the actual forecasting process rather than the data itself.
So, okay, I'm going to ask a question which is going to be on, I reckon, on many people's lips.
Yeah.
We've basically said that most people bullshit.
Yeah.
And therefore, when you are there as a sales manager, I'm putting my sales manager shoes on. Hang on. There we go. Now I've got my sales manager shoes, and I'm looking at this litany of information in front of me, none of which I can really trust. How am I in... shouldn't I just ignore it all and just go on my gut feel, because I know each of my team very well? I can say that David, he's on the nose. He always errs on caution. Therefore, I suspect that or more will close. Gareth tends to bullshit a bit towards the end of the month if he feels a bit worrying. If you look at the size of his pipeline, he's only got 3 in there, and 2 of them are his best mates. So, you know, do you see what I mean?
Yeah, so you can carry on doing it that way, and that is absolutely fine, and that's what most people do. And really, the only downside to it, in my experience, is that it's a route to mediocrity. Okay, so
of course it is.
You know, it's going to miss opportunities for you to excel and achieve your potential. Why? Is because once you set a forecast, that is what you're aiming for, and therefore that is probably what you're likely to achieve as a maximum. Yeah, you can slightly overachieve. Yeah, you can slightly underachieve. That is the likelihood. For businesses that I'm interested in from my client base, and certainly my clients are very interested in, they're looking actually to have sales interventions that buck that trend, that take them from a growth of, you know, 5-10% a year to something more like 15 or 20% a year or more so. And especially for somebody like me, I work a lot with challenger brands, you know, brands that are not the biggest player in their industry, but are trying to win business off those big players. The establishment.
They're snapping at the heels of the larger players.
So for them, and for any micro businesses or one-man bands actually want to, you know, grow at a much faster pace, which you are empowered to do because of all of your other advantages. You know, you could be more agile and things like that. I would take a much more scientific view of it, and I'll tell you how you do sales forecasting.
Okay.
And certainly this will be easier to understand for anybody who's ever seen or used CRM software, or any kind of pipeline management. So what you have in a pipeline is a list of sales opportunities, preferably qualified sales opportunities, but sales opportunities. And those sales opportunities go through different stages in your sales cycle, starting with, at the beginning, qualified lead. Yeah, where, you know, they could become a client, they have some kind of budget, they know really what they're in the market looking for, and they can give you an estimated close date. Yeah, leading through to be able to whatever stages you have for developing that opportunity, and ultimately leading to a close. And you might have, you know, 3, 4, 5, some people have a dozen different stages, unnecessary in my view, but you know, a number of different stages in that before they're closed, won, or lost. Now, each one of those stages, and you'll see this in CRM software, you'll see something that says a percentage chance of them going from one stage to the next, a conversion rate. You have an ultimate conversion rate. So out of how many leads did we to convert into actual paying customers? And there'll be a conversion rate for each stage as well. So I could say that for a professional service business, by the time you have quoted for somebody, or you've had that conversation about how much it's going to cost, that you've identified the needs or the problem, and that you know when they need it by, you know, we should be closing, if you're in an optimized sales environment, about 1 in 3 of those in the time frame that you originally specified. And remember, it's all linked to time. Yeah, I can say that I have 100% or 90% chance of winning business from Gareth Wax one day. Yeah, but I'm not reporting on one day. I'm not forecasting one day. Forecast by definition requires a time frame. So forecasting for the quarter or for the year typically. So I can look at my conversion rate for all of that. Now, what that means is that from that moment, that stage in the sales process where I've sent a quote, there's a 1 in 3 chance of them converting. Now, I've seen all sorts of percentage chance of conversion from that stage to the close, going up to things like 90%. You know, it's not uncommon for me to ask a salesperson, what are the chances of them bringing this, of them signing this deal by the end of the month, or you know, or this year? And they'll go, well, I mean, they've given me the verbal. I hear that a lot. It's with the lawyers, you know, we're checking terms and conditions. They've told me they want it, you know. So, you know, I'm not 100%, but, you know, 80, 90%. You know, I'll quiz them on that a little bit and they go, well, maybe not 90%, you know, maybe 80%. Now, if you replicate that across all of your deals and all the different stages of your sales cycle, you're going to be converting so much more business than reality and history shows that you have done. And we know this to be true because stock markets around the world are not going up like that.
No.
Yeah. Companies are not growing like that. It just doesn't happen. They're growing, you know, like this, and it's very up and down. You know, there is sort of growth, but it's growth of, I don't know, 5%, if that, quite often. So all of those percentages added up give you way more, firstly, than the 5%. So if we take a disciplined deal by deal ratio, then if we're able to say that if your optimized sales are converting 1 in 3 of quotes to paying clients, then what's the conversion of qualified leads to quoted opportunities? And again, there might be a 1 in 3 chance, especially for things like professional services. And what that means is, out of everybody that falls into your pipeline, as long as they're qualified, and bear in mind, most people get into a pipeline without being qualified. Right. But if they are qualified, then you're talking about 1 in 9, 1 in 10 of opportunities that go into your pipeline that convert into paying clients in the time frame that you specify when you qualified. Now, the reason why we don't like looking at it that way is because it makes us realize that, oh, crikey, I've got loads more opportunities in my pipeline.
Of course.
Yeah. Which is donkey work, and we hate it. Yeah.
It's because we're trying to keep away from the donkey work. That's what you're saying.
That's right. You know, it's a bit like when I tell my clients, do your press ups every day if you want the biceps, or, you know, whatever it is. You know, there's some donkey work involved. You know, people that are successful at this find ways to either enjoy or accommodate the, I'd say, minor discomfort of doing their routines, of doing their daily exercises in order to achieve the outcome.
Right.
Okay. So, you know, the analogy is, if you're going to go into a ring for a fight, you know, people know me, they know I love self-defense. And, you know, you're preparing for that moment when you're going to be attacked on the street, or if you're a fighter, you know, sportsman, there'll be you've got a fight coming up. I had a conversation last night at training with somebody who wants to do, you know, one of these competitive bouts. But you're talking about 3 to 6 months of hard training for that one moment. Yeah, it's not something that everybody can do because they might not be able to sustain the discomfort, and they might not optimize that discomfort, so they're doing their exercises in an efficient way. They're training in an efficient way. The same applies to sales. If we want to achieve that big win in the ring, if we want to be able to say to somebody at some point, well, are we doing this or what, and close that deal and deal with their objections, and perhaps even improve on the 1 in 3 conversion rate, then we need to be able to maximize what we're doing earlier on. So qualifying properly and be disciplined all the way through. Why does this even matter? Why should we forecast? And why does good forecasting help us break through the mediocrity? Well, it's because of this. If I know that I can optimize my sales activities and what exactly I have to do from an activity point of view in order to achieve a particular goal, then of course I'm more likely to be able to achieve that goal. And if I can forecast myself that if I do these things, then I will achieve this based on my historical conversion rate, then A, I can work on improving my conversion rates, but B, I can set my sights more realistically on that more enhanced goal, and so therefore more likely to achieve it. It's that.
Wow. But it's so. All right. I think we've come to that time where we require a David Chernick summary. Put it all together for us, David.
Okay. People get forecasting wrong is because they're basing it on their feeling, gut feeling, and psychology, and fears of missing their goals and targets, and being trying to sort of be mediocre.
Esoteric stuff.
Correct. Instead, use science. If you have been in business for any period of time, you can use conversion rates, like I've just told you now, standard conversion rates. You can check whether historically, even in the last year, the deals that you pitched for, how many of those that you pitched actually converted in the actual time frame that you originally had planned for or had expected. So you can work out your own conversion rate. You can work back from what goal you want to achieve and see how much opportunity you need in your pipeline, and therefore how much activity you need to do to get it. And you can set your sights much more realistically. And there's an added bonus if you manage to do this, and that is that you're able to plan for the capacity that you will need. Yeah, it's going to be very difficult for even in a big business to go to the board and ask for a budget in order to spend money on resources if you are not able to justify what you are forecasting.
Yeah, planning is everything in small businesses, because then you know how much your cost of sales are, and therefore you can work out that profit sanity rather than dealing with that revenue vanity. Thank you so much.
You've got a better chance of being able to achieve this if you're used to doing things like going to the gym with goals, like deciding to go on do a marathon and knowing what the build-up is. 'Cause it's the same discipline.
Thank you so much, David. Once again, useful information. So all you guys out there who are panicking about putting together your forecast, be a bit stricter with yourself about what you define that should be in it, and build into it an actual process that you believe in, so that you can check yourself every step of the way. So when you get to the point of putting that forecast together, you're basing it on something closer to reality. Until next time, thank you, David, for helping us on our merry ways. And all of you out there watching, try and keep your feet on the ground. Keep reaching for the stars, and just look after that mental health. Bye-bye now.
Ciao, ciao.